The man standing downstairs claimed to be my father. I almost laughed when my assistant told me. Not because it was funny, but because I hadn't heard that word connected to a real person in 26 years. I was sitting in my corner office preparing to sign a $40 million contract when Jennifer walked through the door and whispered, "Miss Richardson, there's a man downstairs who says he's your father." My pen stopped moving. I looked at the contract in front of me, then at her. "What did you say?" She repeated it. "A man. Claiming to be my father. The same man who walked out on my mother and me when I was 2 years old. The same man who never called on my birthdays. Never sent a card. Never came when my mother died. Never once asked whether the little girl he'd left behind had enough to eat. And now, 26 years later, he was standing in the lobby of my company. The company I had built from one laptop, a tiny apartment, and a determination born from everything my mother had sacrificed for me. TechVista was worth $200 million. And somehow, my father had found me at exactly the right time. I told Jennifer to send him upstairs. I wanted to hear what could possibly be so important that it had taken him 26 years to come looking for his daughter. I thought he was going to apologize. I thought maybe he wanted forgiveness. I was wrong. He walked into my office, sat across from me, and placed a folder on my desk. Then he looked me directly in the eyes and said 6 words that made my entire body go cold: "I believe I deserve half of it." Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Aaliyah Richardson, and by the time my father returned, I had spent 26 years learning how to live without him. My mother, Sandra, never spoke badly about him when I was little. She simply worked. She worked mornings at a daycare, evenings cleaning offices, and weekends at a grocery store. Sometimes she would come home so exhausted that she'd fall asleep sitting at the kitchen table. I remember being 8 years old and trying to make dinner for us because I knew she needed the rest. We didn't have much, but my mother had one thing she refused to let me lose: hope. Whenever I complained about our situation, she'd smile and say, "One day, sweetheart, you're going to have choices." I didn't understand what she meant then. I do now. My father had made his choice too. He chose to leave. He didn't disappear because he was unable to support us. He simply decided that another life would be easier. He started over with another woman, another home, and eventually 2 sons. Meanwhile, my mother and I learned how to survive without him. When I was 18, I earned a scholarship to college. I studied computer science, worked part-time, and built software in a tiny apartment that barely had room for my desk. My mother was the first person to believe TechVista could become something real. She died 5 years ago, just before our company landed its first major contract. She never got to see what happened next. TechVista exploded. Investors came. Employees came. Customers came. And eventually, the little company I built from nothing became worth $200 million. I never forgot where it started. That's why my father's arrival felt like an insult to everything my mother had endured. He sat across from me as if we were old friends. His hair was silver at the temples, his suit probably cost more than my mother's monthly income had ever been, and there wasn't a trace of shame in his expression. "Aaliyah," he said softly. "You've become a beautiful woman." I stared at him. "It's Ms. Richardson." His smile disappeared for a moment. "Of course." He leaned back. "I know I wasn't there. You weren't there for 26 years. I made mistakes. You abandoned a 2-year-old. He looked down. "I was young." "How old were you?" I asked. He hesitated. 32. I almost laughed. 32 wasn't a child. He had been old enough to know exactly what he was doing. I asked him the only question that mattered. "Why are you here?" He sighed dramatically and told me he had a wife named Caroline and 2 sons, Joshua and Clifford Jr. He wanted me to meet them. He wanted his family to become whole. I told him we had never been a family. Then his expression changed. The warmth disappeared. "Fine," he said. "I'll be direct." He opened the folder. "My attorney believes I may have grounds to claim a percentage of your company's success." I stared at him. "On what basis?" He actually had the audacity to smile. "I'm your father," he said that like it was an investment contract. He claimed his genetics had contributed to my intelligence, that his decision to have a child had made my existence possible, and that decades of my success couldn't erase his biological contribution. Then he said the number. 50%. Half of TechVista. Half of everything I'd built. "You didn't build this company," I said. "You didn't write the code. You didn't pitch investors. You weren't there when I slept 4 hours a night. You weren't there when Mom was sick. You didn't contribute a single dollar." He stood. "You should think carefully before you reject my offer. I can take this to court." I pointed toward the door. "Then take it." He placed his business card on my desk. "You have 1 week." Then he walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened the old shoebox where my mother had kept the most important pieces of our life. Inside was a photograph of me at 18 months old sitting on my father's lap. He was smiling. I was smiling. Looking at that picture made me angry because the man in it didn't look like someone capable of abandoning his child. Under the photograph were letters my mother had written to him. Dozens of them. She had begged him to come home. She had asked him to help with medical bills. She had told him about my first day of school. He never answered. Then I found my mother's journal. One entry was dated when I was 7. She wrote that I had asked why Daddy didn't love me. She had told me he was far away for work. She wrote that she knew he wasn't coming back, but she couldn't bear to tell her little girl that someone could choose to leave her. I cried that night. Not because I missed my father. I cried because I realized how many years my mother had spent protecting me from a truth I was finally old enough to understand. 5 days later, the lawsuit arrived. My attorney, Donna Butler, read the claim twice before looking at me. "This may be the most ridiculous case I've seen in 30 years. Clifford's attorney argued that his biological contribution to my existence created a basis for financial entitlement. Donna shook her head. "This isn't about winning. He's trying to scare you into settling." I asked what we should do. She closed the folder. "We fight." And that's exactly what we did. But then something unexpected happened. I received a message from a man named Joshua Richardson. He was 23 and, according to the message, my half-brother. We met at a quiet coffee shop. He looked nervous when I arrived. "I didn't know about you until 2 weeks ago," he said. "Dad told us he had a daughter from before." I asked what he thought about the lawsuit. He looked ashamed. "I think it's disgusting." Then he leaned closer. "There's something you need to know. Dad is in serious financial trouble." He explained that Clifford had made several terrible investments. He had borrowed heavily against his businesses and properties. His money was disappearing. "He isn't here because he suddenly wants a relationship," Joshua said. "He needs money." Then he added something that made my stomach turn. "He has been watching your company for years." The lawsuit became public. Headlines appeared everywhere. Billionaire tech founder sued by estranged father. Some people supported me. Others called me selfish. Social media became vicious. Protesters appeared outside my office carrying signs about family and forgiveness. Clifford gave interviews portraying himself as a broken father trying to reconnect with his daughter. He never mentioned the letters he ignored. He never mentioned the child support he stopped paying. He never mentioned the 26 years of silence. He simply repeated one sentence: "I gave her life." Meanwhile, my board became nervous. One director suggested that I settle. Pay him something and make this disappear. I looked around the conference room and thought about my mother. "My mother gave me her entire life," I said. "She worked until her body couldn't take any more. She never asked me for a percentage of my success. She never demanded recognition. She simply wanted me to have a future." I stood up. "I'm not paying the man who abandoned us to pretend he helped build that future." Donna began discovery. We requested financial records, communications, business documents, and everything connected to Clifford's claim. And that's when things started getting strange. We discovered that Clifford had lied about his financial situation. He wasn't broke when he abandoned us. He had money. He had investments. He had opportunities. He simply chose to start over. Then Diana contacted us. She was Clifford's first wife. She told us he'd done the same thing to her. He had controlled their finances, isolated her from friends, and left when she could no longer give him what he
We
wanted.
discovered that Clifford had lied. Clifford doesn't love people, he calculates what they can provide.
Agreed to testify. But the biggest surprise came from Joshua. He had started investigating his father on his own. During the trial, he took the witness stand. Clifford looked furious. Joshua calmly explained that his father had spent years telling him and his brother that he was a victim of circumstances. But Joshua had discovered something else. My father wasn't a young man who made a desperate mistake, he said. He was 32. He knew exactly what he was doing. He left Aaliyah and her mother because he wanted a different life. Clifford started shouting. The judge ordered him to remain silent. Joshua continued. And when this lawsuit started, I discovered my father had been hiding assets. The courtroom became silent. Joshua revealed that Clifford had created shell companies and moved money around in preparation for the lawsuit. His goal wasn't reconciliation. His goal was extraction. Donna then presented the evidence showing that Clifford had no legal basis to claim half of my company. The judge dismissed the case and ordered Clifford to pay my legal fees. As I walked out of the courthouse, Clifford cornered me. "You've destroyed my family," he whispered. I looked at him and said, "No. You destroyed it when you chose yourself." For the first time, he had nothing to say. My company recovered. The media eventually moved on. Joshua and his younger brother began contacting me separately from their father. I was cautious, but over time, we developed a relationship. They weren't responsible for what Clifford had done. They were simply two sons who had finally discovered the truth about the man they thought they knew. I thought the nightmare was over. 6 months later, I received a call from Mercy General Hospital. Clifford had suffered a severe stroke. He was asking for me. I almost refused. Donna had told me, "You don't owe him a goodbye." But something inside me made me go. When I entered his hospital room, he looked smaller than I remembered. His face was partially paralyzed, and his voice was barely a whisper. Joshua and his brother left us alone. I expected an apology. Instead, Clifford pointed toward the chair beside his bed. "There's something you don't know," he whispered. Then he told me something that changed everything. 8 years earlier, when TechVista was struggling, an anonymous investor had provided $500,000. That money had saved my company. I'd always wondered who the investor was. Clifford looked at me. It was me. I couldn't breathe. He explained that he had invested through a shell company and received a percentage of TechVista in return. 23%. He hadn't wanted me to know. He had waited while I built the company. Then, when it became valuable, he planned to reveal his ownership. Donna investigated immediately. The documents were real. Clifford legally owned 23% of TechVista. At the company's current valuation, those shares were worth approximately $46 million. But there was another problem. Clifford had changed his estate documents. If he died, the shares would pass according to his will. Donna looked at me carefully. "He left them to you." I couldn't understand it. After everything, why? Then I read the letter he had written. He said he wanted me to know that he had been part of my success, whether I admitted it or not. He wanted his name attached to what I'd built. Even after losing the lawsuit, he wanted one final way to force himself into my story. 2 weeks later, Clifford died. At his funeral, almost no one came. I stood beside his casket and realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply tired. I kept the shares. Not because Clifford deserved to profit from my success, but because I refused to let his manipulation destroy something that belonged to thousands of people who depended on TechVista. Then I did something he never expected. I sold the shares and used the entire $46 million to create the Sandra Richardson Foundation, named after the woman who actually gave me everything. The foundation supports single mothers pursuing education, technology, and entrepreneurship. We provide scholarships, business grants, mentorship, and access to resources for women who are trying to build a better life for their children. At the foundation's opening ceremony, I stood in front of hundreds of women and thought about my mother. I remembered her saying, "One day, sweetheart, you're going to have choices." Finally, I understood. She hadn't been talking about money. She had been talking about freedom. The freedom to choose who we become. The freedom to walk away from people who hurt us. The freedom to build something better. Today, TechVista is worth more than $300 million. Joshua and his brother are part of my life, and we have built a relationship that has nothing to do with Clifford. They even changed their last names because they wanted to create identities separate from the man who raised them. Sometimes people ask whether I forgive my father. My answer is complicated. I don't carry hatred anymore, but forgiveness doesn't mean giving someone access to you. It doesn't mean pretending the damage didn't happen. And it certainly doesn't mean allowing someone to rewrite history. My father gave me DNA. My mother gave me a life. She gave me every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every encouraging word, every moment she could have spent on herself but chose to spend on me. She never asked for anything in return. That was love. Real family isn't defined by biology. It's defined by who stays when life becomes difficult. Who shows up when nobody is watching. Who believes in you before the world has a reason to. My father walked away when I was 2. My mother stayed. And everything I am today began with that choice. Sometimes I still look at that old photograph of myself sitting on my father's lap. I don't hate the little girl in that picture for wanting her father. I feel sorry for her. She deserved better. But she also had a mother who refused to let abandonment define her future. So when I visit my mother's grave, I don't tell her about the $46 million. I don't tell her about the courtroom or the headlines. I tell her about the women whose lives were changing. I tell her about the single mother who opened her first business because of a grant from her foundation. I tell her about the young woman who became the first person in her family to graduate from college. And I tell her that we made it. Not because my father came back. Not because he gave me anything. We made it because she never stopped believing that her little girl deserved a future. And that, more than any company valuation, any inheritance, or any amount of money, is the greatest inheritance I could ever receive. If you've ever had to set boundaries with someone simply because they share your blood, remember this: biology may explain where you came from, but it does not determine who gets to stay. Family is built through love, sacrifice, loyalty, and action. And sometimes the strongest family you will ever have is the one you choose for yourself.